All right, next up, coronavirus politics. What can I say about coronavirus and what's going on in the world at the moment? And I've thought long and hard about this. And I realised actually perhaps what I have to say is this. It's an appeal for calm. Number one commandment in Scripture is fear not. And I'm afraid that there is a lot of fear. I think what's happening right now in Australia, especially Victoria with developments there, and the world is driven by fear. And I think that the political response is also being governed by that fear that people have. Both of those things are not helping us. Victoria has the toughest lockdowns we've experienced in Australia at stage 4 in 31 local government areas in Melbourne. That's over 5 million people. There's 4 reasons to leave the house: necessary work and education, necessary goods and services, medical care and compassionate reasons, and exercise. But exercise is limited to 1 hour a day within 5 kilometres of your home. Shopping is limited to 1 person per household per day within 5 kilometres of home. A curfew applies, which is an astonishing thing to me, between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. in a free country. And it's the usual stuff with businesses deemed non-essential, they're closed, and most who still have jobs are working from home. But basically, as a result of those measures, 500,000 workers have been stood down, with more to come. All this is done to save lives. But I genuinely do wonder, I really do, whether there's more harm than good being done, whether we're creating fear where we shouldn't be. And I thought about it long and hard, and bear with me while I explain. Firstly, it's important to realise that there's no cost-free approach to dealing with coronavirus. There are times in life, in this fallen world, when we encounter things that are going to hurt no matter what we do. All we can hope for is to act wisely and minimise the pain. And what that involves is weighing up the severity of the situation, weighing up the severe implications of the possible responses, and plotting a path between. And the severity and pain of the present crisis comes to us in several forms, and we're focusing on some and not others. Yes, there's illness. Of course that's severe, of course that's painful. Yes, there is the fact that some people will die from the illness. That is always tragic, okay? But then there's also other costs. Let's take the cost of isolation, which are hard to measure, but they are serious. For example, loneliness. It's exceedingly hard on people. For example, those who are struggling with mental health concerns, those who are recovering from addictions. Both groups stand to lose a very great deal. In fact, if you're recovering from an addiction and you're put into this kind of isolation, you're in big trouble. Big trouble. Phone calls to mental health services are through the roof. One can turn to economic matters, but recognising that when we say economic matters, we are actually talking about people and about lives. Look at what this is doing to small business people. Look at what this is doing to those without jobs. Bankruptcies, a horrifying impact on individuals and their entire families. Businesses sinking into voluntary administration, same story. But also the same for their staff, for their shareholders, for their clients, for their creditors. There's that ripple effect that works its way out into countless more people. Now, do these things take a toll on people in terms of, really harming their lives? Yes. Do they take a toll on people in terms of lives actually lost? Well, actually, yes, they do. Suicide rates in this country are already through the roof. And these are precisely the reasons why people commit suicide. Then there's future costs. The government had already racked up $250 billion in economic measures. Debt, inflation, interest rates, taxes, an intergenerational burden. I mean, all that stuff is now on the line. And there's a great flurry of people saying, debt doesn't matter, it's okay. Oh yeah, I was listening to one bloke and they said, it doesn't matter so long as we grow out of it. Well, we won't be growing so long as a coronavirus comes along again, will we? Or a GFC comes along, or we continue on this downward spiral. And what of the divided world that we're waking up to? Can the world continue to exist in a patchwork of isolated bubbles? With places with COVID and places without COVID? Does that separation sustain itself long term? It actually can't. And see, this is the thing. There's no clear end goal here. Are we trying to eradicate? Are we trying to minimise? When's it okay to come out? What happens if it spikes again? What's the goal? No articulated goal. No way out. No actual strategy to resolve this. So I repeat, there is no cost-free approach. This is not a battle of those who care about people and those who do not. That is a self-righteous accusation to smear people, and it's quite wrong. Everyone's concerned about people. But how are we navigating these costs? Well, we're stopping the spread, sort of. Not that much success so far. But what about other costs? Let me put it this way. What if the media didn't merely publish the daily number of coronavirus cases? What if it also published the daily number of cases from other illnesses as well? So we've got a perspective as to what's normal, like flu and other things. What if they published a daily tally of deaths from all causes? So we've got a perspective on how many people die every day, normally. What if they did a tally of individuals declared bankrupt, or businesses that have gone into administration, or people that have lost their jobs, or people requiring mental health services, or a leaderboard of people who had gone without social contact for the longest, or the number of revived addictions, or the number of suicides? Or what if the media reported and seriously contended with and wrestled with and reasoned through some of these perspective-giving facts? Firstly, that the American Centre for Disease Control estimates the COVID fatality rate at 0.26%, when the fatality rate from a bad flu season is 0.24%. That 440 Australians die every day from all causes, 161,000 per year. They're just not published, they're not focused on, they're not turned into a disaster. In a population of over 25 million, there are currently 43 coronavirus cases classified as serious. 1% of cases become critical. The vast majority, close to 99% of cases, are mild. The fatality statistics, include those that died with COVID, and not just those that died of COVID. And there's an important difference. 85% of the small number of fatalities are in nursing homes. And that's not said to diminish the elderly at all. There are some that say, oh, well, it matters less. It doesn't matter any less. However, what it does tell us is where we should be focusing our energies if we really want to solve this. Is it not so that if we crack that code of protecting the elderly in nursing homes, well, the death rate reduces to a very, very small number indeed. Victoria actually had 400 more deaths than usual, than average, in the month of April. Very few of those were COVID deaths. There was less people on the roads, less people were in hospitals, and flu and the contagious diseases were down because of the isolation. So what were those deaths? Were they suicides? It's a very good question. Well, what about this perspective-giving fact? Sweden. All we hear about Sweden is, oh, not Sweden. Sweden was a disaster. Sweden did a silly thing. Sweden got themselves into all kinds of trouble. The country that didn't lock down, the country that gave its citizens advice and then said, well, the only way through this is to just get through it and just be careful about yourselves. We're not going to impose any lockdowns, etc. But what was the scale of this so-called disaster, this nation that they've tried to turn into some kind of pariah? Do you know if you're a Swede? Now, by the way, the death rate is right down basically to nearly nothing. There will be more, but it's intermittent and the curve is all the way down. If you're a Swede, you had a 99.95% chance of surviving the pandemic. Going back to my point about focusing on the elderly, and I wish I had an under 70 or under 80 stat, but I've only got an under 60 stat. But listen to this. If you're under 60, a 99.998% chance of surviving. That's also a better result than some lockdown countries like Belgium, like the United Kingdom, like Spain, like Italy. So how effective are the lockdowns? So is this a state of disaster? Look, if all of this was reported, if all of these things, if the media focused on all the costs, if the media focused on all these perspective-giving statistics, do you know what? COVID-19 would fade into its context, and it would actually fade into the background. That's what I sincerely believe. If that happened, COVID-19 wouldn't look like a state of disaster where the government has the power to suspend or override any law and the police minister controls government operations. It's a crazy reaction. If that happened, we might actually care a little bit less about a relatively benign pandemic and more about people's daily needs and the full scale of costs that this is imposing on the society. Like I said, there's no cost-free way. You've got to pick your costs. All of them affect people's lives. You know, if that happened, we might actually see that this must surely be about the safest pandemic in history. And yet we're behaving like this is the Black Death. We're behaving like a quarter of the population are going to die, like we're in wartime, and the wartime metaphors continue to roll in like we're fighting for our lives. This is not a state of disaster. By making provision for the elderly and the frail, a country can see a near total survival rate, and that ought to be the focus. And by locking down in this way that we have, my fear is that we're destroying so much more than we're claiming to preserve. We're ruining so many more lives than we are claiming to save. And it made sense initially, totally into it initially, because we didn't know what we were facing, and all we had was Italy, which looked terrible. It made sense initially because some countries had a chance at early eradication, like New Zealand. But gosh, things have changed. And the question arises, well, why is it happening? Why is this the case? Why are we destroying ourselves willingly and crying out, make us safe, do anything, do what it takes, no matter the destruction? Well, it might not be the sensible response, but I can tell you it surely is the political response. And it's the political response because people are scared. Mind you, I'm not surprised that they're scared with, as I said, the media coverage and the pro-lockdown media saying, well, if you're not pro-lockdown then to the maximum degree, then you hate grandma. And I saw a headline in a major newspaper the other day that literally said, be afraid. Be afraid. It's astonishing. And that's the case right across the West. And so the politician who is, quote unquote, saving lives and being tough on the virus and leading the way in COVID safety is the politician who rides high in the polls, gets a huge boost and wins the day. That's the politician who deals with an outbreak. That's the politician who deals with the virus and is applauded by everybody, who says, make us safe, whatever the cost, not knowing what they're saying. But the politician who has to handle an outbreak, the politician whose country looks chaotic, like, say, Donald Trump, or like, say, the costs politically that Daniel Andrews has had to go through. The politician that lets the virus out of the bag, they are blamed and they are held to total accountability. And politicians, therefore, unsurprisingly, because they're politicians, behave politically. They don't behave especially rationally. Do you know the most prevalent command in all of the Bible, as we know, is fear not. And you know, if people are this scared of the virus, we're not doing very well on that front. And I do wonder what it says about us as a people. But there is no reason to fear, not just for spiritual reasons, and I'm glad that I've got those as well. God is in control. My life is in His hands. But, you know, there's practical reasons not to fear as well. And I think we just need to get that perspective. And I think when we have that perspective, this virus fades into a context, a much broader context, and it doesn't look scary at all. Now, before I go, I want to say two things. The first one is that I'm not advocating for disobedience to the government rules. That's a different issue. I think Christians need to be very, very careful about that sort of thing, and I might deal with it in a separate topic. Secondly, I am not saying that this is a conspiracy. I don't believe that. I think it's real. But I do think that the response is politically driven, more so in America, by the way, because of the election. And I actually think that is affecting the way that this virus is being dealt with and the fear that's being stoked around it. So I think America's got a particular problem, but we do have a political problem in Australia as well with the handling of the virus. And that said, that wraps up my thoughts on coronavirus politics. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe by hitting the icons below, and make sure you hit the grey bell as well so you get notified when there's a new video. And if you want to watch more, you can click on the links right about here. Thank you.